Look, the Aztecs basketball program is the #2 draw in San Diego now that the Chargers have left. They're right behind the Padres going forward. So this is huge for them. It's huge for the city. And hats off to Brian Dutcher. I'm putting my hand up. I doubted this team multiple times throughout the season. I doubted this team probably multiple times in this tournament. I doubted whether or not Brian Dutcher was the right person for the job. I was wrong. What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome in to the final 4 edition of the In the Paint podcast. A really historic one for us here in San Diego, obviously. And of course, when I say we, I mean myself and my co-host will go around the horn, if you will. We'll start with Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing real good. How's everybody out there? Thank you for tuning in and listening to us, giving us a listen. And I will say, we're 3 guys who get together once a week, twice a week. Sometimes we talk football, sometimes we talk NCAA basketball, and on occasion we talk thoroughbred racing. We talk about sports entertainment. We talk about gambling entertainment, but we're also very human, very in tune with community. And so on behalf of the First Off the Bench podcast network, I'd like to send out our condolences and support to all those people who were affected by the tornado and by the shooting over in the Midwest and the East just the past few days. God be with you and bless you, and may recovery be there for everybody.
Amen. Well said. Yeah, as you said, we don't cover that side of things. That's for different podcasts and from different people. And but yes, no matter what, and they speak for all of us. Thoughts, prayers, condolences, and as you said, support as well to everyone affected by the tragedies this week. Just heartbreaking stuff. But sometimes now it's easy for us to say we're kind of on the outside looking in, but sports are a great distraction. In certain situations, I don't think there are a ton of people who were affected who really care about that, but I do think it is a nice ability to escape the real life kind of horrors we've been dealing with lately. But we also, of course, have Coach Brandon Lupian. You can find Coach at Portland 76er. How you doing tonight, sir?
Doing well, and my sentiments exactly issued by my colleagues here. Just inside, staying dry, getting a chance to enjoy a little NCAA basketball talk, and just have a few good laughs. Probably receive a couple of jabs from Raider Jim from time to time and whatnot, but it's all good. It's all good, clean fun, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, this is I don't know how many jabs that can come San Diego State fans' way these days, especially coming from Gonzaga. Oh, that was unfortunate. Yeah. Hey, I'm here for you.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very obviously historic Sweet 16 and Elite 8 as the Final 4 is set. We'll break it all down for you and give our thoughts on the upcoming games of the weekend. But we do have, all kinds of history. You could probably do an entire podcast on all the first that this Final 4 is, but the one that really jumps out to me, first one ever, where we're going to see 3 new teams in the Final 4. As me and Coach were talking earlier before we hit record, last year was the Final 4 of Blue Bloods. You had Kansas, North Carolina, Kentucky, I believe, and Villanova, all the Blue Bloods essentially. This year it is the New Bloods, the 4 seed UCON Huskies, not only the favorites to do it, but also the highest seed. So we first Final 4 with no top 3 seeds. Just really kind of speaks to the madness of not only the tournament, but also of the season. But we are going to start in the South region. Of course, this was a little, biased on my side putting the rundown together. We're going to start in the West, so we're going to start with the big, huge news here in locally here in San Diego, where the winner of the South Regional, the San Diego State Aztecs, at the moment they are 31-6 overall. They'd love to get to 33 wins this year and be able to hang a banner in maybe one of the more improbable wins ever in NCAA basketball. Obviously, SDSU shocked the top seed Alabama in the Sweet 16 and held on in a nail biter against Creighton in the Elite Eight. The final 8 seconds of the SDSU Creighton game was full of controversy. But the way I look at it is a foul is a foul, whether it's 2 seconds into the game or 2 seconds left in the game, or in this case, essentially 0.3 seconds left, or whatever it was. I think it was 1.2 when it was all said and done, at least for that inbound. But it was very similar, at least in my mind, to what we saw in the Super Bowl with that James Bradbury holding call. Did I want it to be called? Obviously, as an Eagle fan, no. But even as a neutral fan, you don't want the game to end that way. However, it was a hold. You can be upset that the referee called it in that moment, but you cannot say it wasn't a foul. Same thing in this situation with San Diego State Creighton. He had his hand in his hip as he was shooting the ball. That is a foul. And once again, you can argue whether or not you wanted it to be called or you wanted the game to end that way. That's fine. That's an up for debate. The fact whether or not it was a foul, that is not, unfortunately. But we'll start with Coach. Obviously, my co SDSU analyst, if you will. Coach, what are your thoughts on obviously the South Regional, but mainly San Diego State getting through that buzzsaw and punching their first ever ticket to the Final Four?
You know, before the tournament started, they always have that bracket, the hardest bracket to come out of. Well, it wasn't necessarily the South, but the South came a close second to, I believe it was the West,
Yeah.
as far as the hardest bracket to get out of. I'll tell you right now, let me be quite honest. I am happy that the selection committee took a Mountain West regular season conference champion and tournament champion, seeded them five, and then shipped them across the country instead of up in Sacramento, where all the locals want them to be, because not only was the West the toughest as we see it, they're probably facing the hottest team in the tournament right now, and that's UConn. So I'm happy with where we got placed. It definitely was a tough regional based on the teams that came out. I mean, Bama, the number one overall team, regardless of what State did to them on Friday. Princeton making a huge upset against number four Arizona. You know, it just kind of shows, and it kind of goes back to what we all spoke about early on in the season: uh, parity across the nation, right? Nobody expected Princeton to get through where they did, getting into the Elite Eight. Creighton, kind of like UConn, was beat up in their own conference in the Big East, got through to the Elite Eight, and according to their seed, weren't supposed to. San Diego State, great game against Alabama, got Alabama to play our style of play, just like we got Creighton to play our style of game, advancing to the Elite Eight and now into the Final Four. So, a tough bracket, a tough regional in itself, with a bunch of different nuances to things. I mean, again, the number one overall team in the nation. And let's just go here real quick, because and it didn't necessarily happen on our show, but I heard other shows where the excuse was the Brandon Miller distraction. BS. BS. If anything, it's State's age, or San Diego State's age and maturity and depth that got them that win against the number one team in the nation. So I'm excited. I'm happy for Coach Dutch. I'm happy for the town. And I'm excited for this weekend's tournament. I mean, the Final Four. Yeah, it's San Diego State's first of many. I'm going to put that out there in the future. and it's just an exciting time to be here. It's just an exciting time to be a fan.
Amen. Yeah, it's I think for me personally, I do think I don't know if vindication is the right word. Maybe they've come full circle because we talked about it maybe a few weeks ago with San Diego State in 2020. This was a team that you could have made a very, very good case that they would have made the Final Four had the tournament gone through. I think they were 30-2 heading into the tournament, just dominant. And
Hmm.
a lot of the reason why a lot of these kids, I think 7 seniors on this team, a lot of the reason why now they did bring in some transfers, but Mensa, the Seikos, those guys were on that team and really didn't
Hmm.
get a chance. And here they are now in the Final Four, kind of that redemption run, if you will. But Raider Jim, what were your thoughts of the South Regional and more importantly, the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight?
Sports success in San Diego seems to be so few and far between. This is a fantastic thing, especially in this arena. We did have the run with the Padres last year. We'll see. I hope rain on opening day isn't a sign of what's to come. Maybe it's just me being too what's the word? I'm just
Pessimistic?
yeah,
Cynical.
maybe that's a good word. But it's the Aztecs, what a great run. They're number 5. Everybody always says 5 seed is the seed you don't want to play because they can be the most dangerous seed. Interesting to see how it's going to happen because if this was a craps table, you'd have a hard 10 coming up this weekend because they're playing the number 5 Miami team, who at least if everything else I've said over the last few weeks has just been shot to pieces, you can go back, listen to the transcripts. I kept saying, watch this Miami team. These kids are good. But San Diego State, boy, they are the kids right now. And congratulations to them. I hope they do well. The South overall, what do you say? The 2-team Arizona didn't get out of the opening round. The 3-team Baylor didn't get past the round of 32. Things were just falling apart right and left. And it wasn't just that bracket. That's just how this whole tournament went. I mean, for goodness sakes, the 4 team didn't make it out of the opening round either. That was Virginia. Virginia, who, a lot of people probably had them down to the Sweet 16, if not further. And there they were, left behind by Old Furman. And to build on what Coach said, yeah, when it comes right down to it, and this is nothing, this is not taking away from the caliber of play the Aztecs have been putting on the floor. But wow, you talk about uh, getting the perfect draw. Everything's just fallen into place. And so, and I'm not surprised they beat Alabama. I've seen Alabama get beat during the year or have off nights. And yeah, the controversy with Miller, okay, fine, it's out there. But you know what? He's not the whole team. He is not the whole team. So again, just congratulations to San Diego State. Looking forward to see if they can move on and be on that big Monday night game.
Yeah, they all say we all want to just play Monday in April. That is the goal for every team. It's obviously a lot more attainable than most, and now 4 teams can kind of see it on the horizon. I'm glad that San Diego State, obviously, for obvious reasons, beat Alabama, but I'm also really glad that they faced Alabama because, as Raider Jim kind of alluded to, if you do look at San Diego State, there is that quote unquote easy draw. Look, obviously, Charleston, a very good basketball team, but they took care of business of the 12 seed. Second round, then they had a 13 seed to deal with, took care of Furman. And then even in the Elite Eight, you don't see too many 6 seeds. I believe that was the first 5-6 matchup ever in the Elite Eight. So you don't see too many 6 seeds at that moment. So you could sit there and say, wow, this team just kind of, took care of business against lesser teams, but they also did take down the number 1 overall seed
Right.
and really dominated that game. I think they were bigger, stronger. There was a bit early in the second half where Alabama came out and it looked like it was going to get away from the Aztecs. They took a deep breath, got things back on track. And in terms of Brandon Miller being a distraction, I have a solution. Don't play Brandon Miller. He's no longer a distraction. Oh, but then you don't. Yeah, so you can't have it both ways, right? You can't sit here and blame the distraction on it when it's easy. You could have said, "Hey, yeah, you're right. He may have been a distraction. You're going to have to sit down and if you want to play in the NCAA tournament and you get all this stuff figured out, come on back to Alabama. Don't go into the draft. We all know that won't happen, and that's fine. I'm not going to kill the kid for getting into the NBA draft because you get your money when you can. But in terms of that being a distraction, I just it's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot and going, nope, I can't run the race because because my foot hurts. Like, well, you were the one who did that. But for the Aztecs, obviously going forward, I really would have been interested to see how the Aztecs faced off against Virginia, because the
Mhm.
Aztecs have faced kind of those offensive powerhouses. Now, I was surprised to see that Alabama actually statistically was rated better defensively than San Diego State. That was interesting to me. But the other teams that they faced were more of those offensive teams or offensive minded teams. Virginia would have been kind of a San Diego State esque team. It would have been interesting to see how they went about that. Obviously, Furman took care of that early in the tournament, but for the Aztecs, for the city of San Diego, look, the Aztecs basketball program is the number 2 draw in San Diego now that the Chargers have left. They're right behind the Padres going forward. So this is huge for them. It's huge for the city. And hats off to Brian Dutcher. I'm putting my hand up. I doubted this team multiple times throughout the season. I doubted this team probably multiple times in this tournament. I doubted whether or not Brian Dutcher was the right person for the job. I was wrong every stretch of the imagination, and I've never been more excited to be wrong about this team in my life. So congratulations to Dutch and the boys, and for Steve Fisher as well. He obviously wasn't a part of this run or anything like that, but this doesn't happen without the groundwork that Steve Fisher put down on the Mesa over his career. So hats off to really everyone involved with the San Diego State Aztecs. And it's kind of ironic after all the trailblazing they've done. I think it was Birmingham and then Louisville. It's actually going to be kind of a local game. They're only going to Texas. They're only going to be in the central time zone as opposed to the East. So hopefully the Aztecs and the show will make a great appearance there, and it helps that there are no Texas teams to kind of steal some of those seats as well. So moving on to the East Regional recap. This was another very crazy region. We obviously see the 9 seed Florida Atlantic Owls win the region. They're 35-3. Don't see too many 9 seeds at 35-3. They will be trying to hopefully get their 36th and 37th win of the year. They, of course, took down number 4 Tennessee and number 3 K-State in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8, respectively. At the moment, Florida Atlantic's 35 wins are the most of any team remaining. Raider Jim, I'll give you first crack at the East region. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Florida Atlantic started out being one of the first people to shoot a hole into my bracket, which I had named last week, Sonny Corleone. And when they took out Memphis, who I thought was going to at least make it to the Sweet 16. But here's another round, the East Conference. Number 2 Marquette doesn't even get out of the Sweet 16 or out of the round of 32. Purdue doesn't get out of the round 1. Right there, that really kind of started telling the tale of what we'd be watching for this entire tournament. Now we're down to Florida Atlantic. They had a great game against Kansas State. And here I go. I'm going to climb on my soapbox because I sent both of you guys a text on Saturday as I was watching that game. Kansas State should have won the game. Kansas State did not win. I don't care if he had 40 points. I don't care if he had 50 points or 60 points. I don't care how many assists he had. This Marquise Noel kid is believing too much of his press. If his head wasn't as big as it is, he might have been able to make some crucial plays and thought better with some of his passes at the end of the game. Very selfish play, I thought. I get it. Again, he made the lion's share of their points. But this to look in the stands, I've got tired of hearing, and the other day he actually yelled at Isaiah Thomas or whoever it was he yelled at. And I don't need to hear his brother mic'd up in the stands either. Okay? So I think K-State didn't do themselves any favors by shining this big spotlight on this kid, because to me, it became he was the team playing in the Sweet 16, the Elite 8. It wasn't Kansas State. It was him and 4 other guys. That's how I saw it. Now, I only caught the second half of the game. But anyway, but Florida Atlantic, let's move on to bigger and brighter and more positive things. What a fantastic team. The only thing that's interesting of note, the coach, Dusty May, has said that along with the pressure of playing in the tournament, these high caliber teams, etc., these players are being distracted by outside third parties who are trying to make recruiting attempts on his players.
Yeah.
He's very clear to say, I'm not saying coaches are doing it. I'm not going to say at this point what schools are doing it, but they are being approached, and that is a bigger distraction than anything. And he's a stand-up guy in my book. This isn't a guy that's going to make anything up. He doesn't need to make up excuses. He's gotten this team that shouldn't be where they are, but he got them there, and they could very well advance. And if anybody thinks that this is just a bunch of malarkey, think back just 1 year. The Cinderella team, the St. Peter's Peacocks that we all fell in love with, people out buying peacock hats and peacock t-shirts and peacock rosary beads, for gosh sakes. What a great deep run they had. You know what? This year they were 14 and 18. They finished sixth. You know why? After they got out of the tournament, several of their kids hit the transfer portal, and the same thing had surfaced about that team last year.
Yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, the NILs, the transfer portal, things like that.
Exactly.
It's turning in. I think I saw something, I don't remember the name of the anal or the insider, and I'll put up air quotes for everyone listening. But essentially saying Zach Edey has entered the transfer portal, and Zach Edey literally retweeted it saying, "My sources say this is false." But it is the era that we're in now, and it's that the coaches aren't doing it, but at the same time, you have entities that I'm sure have not been told no. Maybe not have been told yes, but they've also not been told no. And I do
They're
think
not
that is
told
a problem.
no, and what they are told is just don't get caught.
Exactly.
That's what
And
they're told. And if you think back to if you've seen the 30 for 30 about the Pony Excess about
oh,
the SMU team with Eric Dickerson and how Dickerson had committed somewhere else, and all of a sudden he gave it to a reporter, and the reporter went with the story, and then the next day it was no, he's going to go to SMU. And they interviewed one of the boosters, I think it was, and he just kind of shook his head and smiled and goes, "You just never know what those 18-year-old kids are going to do."
mhm. Yeah. And a lot of distractions going on, obviously, for Florida Atlantic. They're going to have to deal with that. And then, of course, a very good San Diego State team. And whoever, if they do get past state, then whoever is waiting on the other side for them. So it'll be very interesting. But, Coach, what are your thoughts on the East Regional?
Yeah, kind of like the toss up. I think we mentioned FAU one time throughout the season, and it was against I think it was against UAB, and I was watching and I was like, both teams are like 19-0 or 18-1, and it was an amazing game and they made an amazing run. It's unfortunate that there is those distractions coming about Coach May's team. Um, but let's not to say that's I'm sure he's getting the rightful attention himself from some of these blue blood programs, and as we look forward to the rest of the show where we talk about our coaching carousel recap. These kind of runs is what got um, Enfield over at USC the job. This run is what got Shaheem Holloway back to Seton Hall, and those kids transfer from St. Francis to Seton Hall last season. So these are those kind of runs, and I'm sure he's getting a level of interest, and his kids got to be distracted about that as well. But it's just an ugly side of this game. But what a great run they've made, and they're a real deal. I mean, they are the real deal. And if San Diego State doesn't find a way to make FAU play San Diego State style basketball, it's going to be a long game and it's going to be a scary game. I think they're kind of relating this game to the game that we lost against Florida Gulf Coast a couple of
Oh,
years back, right?
Fun
It's
City.
just that another Florida team, a team that's making a run in a tournament, and for them, they made it to the Final Four, and you know, San Diego State had nothing to lose. I don't want to touch on them much more, but they had nothing to lose coming out of the South. They weren't expected to. Who's the other team that doesn't have anything to lose besides this team here? You know, it goes as far as order of name value in this tournament or in the Final Four: FAU, San Diego State, Miami, and then UConn. So you got two teams that have nothing to lose, that have never been in this position. Um, I'm hoping it neutralizes each other as far as nerves go, but it's going to be an exciting game. And again, if San Diego State doesn't find a way for FAU to play their style, it's going to be a long night. And but what a great run! What a great coach! He's put in the time. He's worked his way up to the system. He's got himself a head coaching job. I think this is his fifth season there, and now look at them. Now look at them. Yeah, the transfer portal has changed a lot of programs. And I saw a post earlier as far as what the University of Miami transfers have been paid via the NIL versus what San Diego State's transfers and current student body is being paid as far as the NIL. There's just some, imbalances in the entire thing, and these Final Four teams have survived that throughout a season. And I'm looking for a good weekend. Without those kind of things coming into play, it's unfortunate it's already started. I'm sure it started. I'm sure it's already started across the nation. I saw Caleb Love, who had a great run in the last year's tournament for North Carolina, enter the transfer portal. So there's just going to be a lot of change, and I think that's something that we as fans, them as coaches, either you're in and can adapt to it, or you can't and you retire, like we've seen most recently. My guy Jay Wright last season at Villanova. Coach K's retirement had, I'm sure a lot of this transfer stuff had a lot to do with it. Uh, some of the older guard of coaches that just say, this whole part of the game is not for me and whatnot. Jim Boeheim this season, I think he pretty much said, look at the team, University of Miami and Wake Forest bots midway through this season, getting beat up in the ACC. So it's just one of those things that if you're a coach nowadays, it's something that you got to adapt and learn to sway it your way, or retire and maybe drop down a level, go D2, go D3, go NAIA, and say, because you do it for the love of the game, you do it for the love of the kids, and you're a really strong coach and you could win at any level. You better adapt or get eaten up. So get with it. But Final Four, can't wait. Can't wait.
Yeah, it's gonna be a heck of a game, obviously, with these two going at it. Two very different teams, but also similar in kind of the way they go, or the way they've gotten here, and maybe the unexpected matchup. I don't think there would have been too many people that had Florida Atlantic and San Diego State meeting, but that's where we are. So
Hey,
we are going to take a quick, little detour. Take a little quote unquote halftime break of talking about the teams that are remaining in the tournament and talk about some of these coaching changes that have been coming out over the last few weeks. Just to name a few, we have Rick Pitino leaving Iona. He is heading back to the Big East. He will take over at
mm,
St. John's. Ed Cooley didn't think he'd ever leave Providence. Well, he did, and he's heading to DC to take control of the Georgetown Hoyas. Tobin Anderson, who we're all introduced to about 3 weeks ago as the head coach of Fairleigh Dickinson, he will replace Rick Pitino at Iona. In the most obvious fill of a coaching vacancy, we saw Rodney Terry become official at Texas. So he got rid of the interim tag. He will be the head coach going forward. On that same vein, we saw Chris Beard, who of course was fired earlier in the year because it's a domestic violence. He's been picked up by Ole Miss. And Micah Shrewsbury, really good. He had a really, really good season and a good career at Penn State, a team that does not usually do well in basketball, had them into the second round this year. He is heading to Notre Dame to take over for the longtime coach Mike Bray, who just
mhm.
retired. Raider Jim, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on the kind of the coaching carousel we've seen so far in college basketball?
Yeah, I'll start top to bottom with your list. Patino going to St. John's, good thing, and he got a little bit of a head start thanks to UConn, because UConn kind of got them out of the tournament real quick. So he got to start his work right away, and he's already been a apparently they said he's already started to regionally do his recruiting. Within hours of the announcement, Patino was very upfront and said, hey, most of the guys that are here on the squad this, 2022, 23, not going to be here next year. They're not a good fit. So he's already made that statement, which is good for him. It's his team. But wow, he's really setting himself up for quite a preseason work that he has to do now and bring in these recruits and or, get people into the transfer portal. But he's got, 7 Final Four appearances, 2 national champions. Resume speaks for itself. You just don't want him to be the person that is responsible for lining up dating and things for the recruits when they come to town, because that's when the trouble begins. Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it.
I love it. I love it. I love the shot at Patino. I love it. Go ahead. Go ahead with
And
your
then
breakdown.
Cooley going to Georgetown. Let me tell you, Cooley, great guy. 2022 Big East Coach of the Year. Respectable, very respectable at Providence. 5 tournament appearances. Run to the Sweet 16, 2021, 22. I'm telling you what, it's kind of, I shouldn't say easy, but it is pretty easy to walk in behind Patrick Ewing and say, I'm going to make this team better. Heck, I think the 3 of us could do that. So watch for Georgetown to turn it around and turn it around pretty good. Coach Cooley said the hardest thing for him, because he does consider Providence his family, was to sit down, express his wishes and desires to the president of Providence and literally get his blessings, because the president of Providence is Reverend Kenneth Sicard. And Reverend Sicard told him, no problem, I understand. And Georgetown can offer you something that we can't offer here, and that is you'll be on the campus with my daughter, who is currently a Hoya. So I thought it was a very professional, respectful way that they conducted their business. Tobin Anderson, FDU to Iona. He's got a lot of D2, D3 experience. He did a good job with Farley Dickinson. Patino did lead the Gales to the top of the Metro Athletic or Atlantic Athletic Conference. So he does have his work cut out for him, because the bar's been set there. Let's see how many guys hang around the Iona team and how many want to follow Coach Patino. What's the recruiting going to be like? Kind of set up hard for him, but I think he'll do pretty good. He's obviously proved he can coach and coach well. Rodney Terry, my only thing is what took so long.
Yeah.
That guy was set in on some of the most adverse circumstances and did such a good job. They should have made this offer before the tournament started, if you ask me. And quite honestly, I even think the offer, albeit fair tenure at 5 years, the pay structure, I think he deserved a little bit more there too. Success to him, years to come. What a great guy, what a great coach. He obviously showed, doesn't matter what the conditions are, I'm here to coach basketball and put a good team on the floor. So congratulations to him. Chris Beard, the only thing about this move is, even now, it's like the first 3, 4 articles I go to read about this, it starts out with him saying, that's not my character. There's 2 sides to the story. And everybody needs to know what really happened. Hey, what are you going to do with this dump of a program you're taking over? These guys were terrible, and they're in a loaded conference.
Yeah.
So at some point, guy, you're going to have to put it behind you, because I can't see people jumping into the transfer portal to come to Ole Miss and be part of your team. And I can't see a lot of parents wanting their kids to make that move either. So we'll see what happens with him. If he could just, it's got to be up to him first, though, to leave it behind. Matter of fact, go ahead and take the position with the press. Hey, I'm done talking about it. I'm here to talk about Ole Miss. So that's my thought on that. Shrewsbury going over to Notre Dame. Notre Dame, thank God they're a football team, football school, not a basketball school. They had a very disappointing season this year. The coach, I think, he was like that teacher in your high school that when you were a freshman, people still said, oh, I don't want to get on his class. But by the time you were a senior, he was retiring. So he just, hey, let's just get through the school year and we'll be done. This guy's got his work cut out for him as well. I hope he does well. He's got a hard road ahead of him.
Yeah, it's not easy. But at the same time, I I think it's a perfect little parallel for Shrewsbury. You're going from Penn State, which is first and foremost a football school, to Notre Dame, which is first and foremost a football school. So now I will say the Irish have had more success on the hardwood than Penn State have, at least in recent years. But it is going to be you're kind of second fiddle in those situations. So that's unfortunate for him. But he does know how to handle that, and I think he's going to be really good. The only thing that I want to add is the Rodney Terry. I agree with you. I cannot believe that it took and it makes me feel like there was this he had to hit like there was pressure, in terms of if we don't make the Sweet 16, we're looking elsewhere. And if that's the case, I mean that's totally just disingenuous, and I think a terrible way to kind of start a professional partnership. And once again, I'm not saying that's the case, but that's what it looks like from the outside. If you don't have this guy locked up before the tournament starts, it makes me believe that there was a target you needed him to hit or he was going to be fired. Now, obviously, he hit whatever that was, if there is one, but I think that was still completely unfair for him. I think as a coach as well, there were a few people who kind of, maybe bah humbug this because of what happened in that Elite Eight game. But I'll tell you this right now, Texas shot the lights out in the first half. I think Miami shot 55% in the first half and we're down by 8. Eventually, the three-pointers are going to stop falling. And unfortunately, in the second half for Texas, they did. That's not in coaching. That's not on really anything. It's just kind of one of those things where, wow, we started whatever 10 of 15 from 3 in the first half. Shoot, we're not going 10 of 15 in the second half. Unfortunately, that was the case for them. But coach, what are your thoughts on the coaching carousel that we've seen so far?
Yeah, I think the rumors were out well before the tournament about Patino and Cooley. Congratulations to Rodney Terry. I'll just leave it at that. I mean, you guys spoke enough in regard to him, but that's not the end of this carousel. Uh, Earlier this week, Dave Odom at Utah State leaves for VCU. I guess he just got tired of getting beat by State. The rumors of Pacino Jr. leaving New Mexico to South Florida. Again, just can't figure it out what they got to do to beat State. So rumors abound. Coaches, this is that time of the year where it's the hot stove of coaching, and Patino and Cooley, they're in great positions because of the name value their universities offer, especially with the transfer portal, especially with both their reputations on that East Coast. So expect big things from these two teams moving forward, and it is what it is. Again, it's that time of the year. But congratulations or congrats to Rodney Terry. We all know what he did at Fresno State. I think the acumen and the resume is fitting for Texas. But are we really surprised it took this long? After we see what they do to their football coaches. I mean, that's a hot spot, and if you don't produce early, you're gone before that contract expires. And for them not to offer them early, it really isn't a surprise to me, but it is frustrating, and it is disheartening, and it is kind of like what you said, disingenuous. If the parameters were set, get to this round, and you stay or don't, and you're gone, and we're looking for the next guy. But how many next guys are out there? There's not that many next guys out there. You know, St. John's for Patino is kind of like the retirement run. Cooley isn't the Texas guy. Those are the top two names that are out there. I don't see anyone else looking at a Texas job, whether it's a big name blue blood guy like Calipari. He wouldn't take that job. And they've already kind of tested their wit with the youthful guy like in Shaka Smart. So I think it's only fitting for Rodney, and if he were to say, hey, look, I'm going to go look elsewhere, there's not that many jobs either, of this magnitude, name value wise, especially going into the SEC in the next couple of years Having that booster support and the NIL abundance in the back pocket. I mean, it's a good move for him, and yeah, it's about time. But congratulations more than anything.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward for a lot of these coaches. Be very interesting that first Georgetown Providence game in Rhode Island to just see the reaction. I hope there's a nice moment to give him Ed Cooley his due, but I'm sure once that game tips off, he'll be quote unquote the enemy, and it's kind of best of luck in 30 of your 32 games because the two you play against us, we're going to hope to beat you, but it'll be
You're
very
right.
interesting going forward. But back to the regional recaps, we're going to stay in the Midwest. Obviously, this was Miami of Florida's region that they won. The Hurricanes are 29-7. I will say this: Miami of Florida had by far the hardest route to get through the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight rounds. The Hurricanes took down top seed in the Midwest, Houston, and they also took down second seed Texas in the Elite Eight. I tell you what, if there are any neutral fans in Houston, Texas, they will not be cheering for the Miami Hurricanes, as of course, we had the hometown Houston Cougars. Their ticket was ripped up. And then
Mhm.
of course Texas would have been a huge fan favorite in that Final Four. Hurricanes took care of them as well. The Hurricanes, of course, will face the Huskies of UConn on Saturday in the semifinals. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the Midwest Regional?
Yeah, I'm sitting here looking at that portion of the bracket right now, and yeah, Houston, I'm still kind of stunned that they went out as early as they did. I saw them definitely going to the eight, probably the four. If they would have won the whole thing, it wouldn't have surprised me. But again, it's that same thing. It's what we talk about. It's football, it's basketball, it's any given game. It's a 6 game season when we get to this tournament, and that's what happened here. Houston gets past Auburn, they run up against Miami, and they lose by 14 points. That's just astounding to me. That's just like San Diego State handling Alabama the way they did. There's a lot of surprise factor right there. But Miami's out there. They're out. They took care of one. They took care of two, and they're moving on. Hats off to Texas and Xavier. They had a great game. Of course, Texas won by a dozen points, but still, Xavier to make it as far as they did, even though they were a 3 seed, I thought they had a good tournament, and they'll be strong again next year.
Yeah, it was a very interesting one. I think the most, I don't know if chalkiest is a word, but I'm going to pretend it is, but it was. There was a lot of chalk on this, especially compared to the other regions, and Miami was kind of that team that just busted through that and said, "Yeah, you might have a one or two in the Sweet 16 Elite 8, but we're going to take care of that real quick." Coach, what are your thoughts on the Midwest Regional?
I didn't have Miami getting past Kent State early, and then they make this amazing run. And I'm like, this is a team that backdoored into the tournament, had won the regular season ACC, didn't do too well down the stretch, but still strong enough. I guess I kind of forgot midway through or up until the tournament, good old trusty Coach Larinaga down there just knows how to coach his guys up, knows how to adapt styles, know how to make the right adjustments to every given opponent that they faced. And look where they're at. They're in the Final Four. Yeah, probably the toughest road, like you said. I mean, having to beat Houston, having to beat Texas, and I guess it just shows. I think this team more than any other team shows positionless basketball. I mean, they run these NBA style sets, and they all could have this ability to score. And he opens up the floor, and we all saw down 16 with 7 minutes left, makes this adjustments to open up the floor against Texas, and then all of a sudden, balls start dropping to the net, and they're celebrating and dancing going into Houston this weekend. So. Um, Great run for Miami. I myself would love to see them get through, just because a really dear friend of mine went to Miami, and I'm a fan of hers, and uh, she's an alum, so there's that connection. So I would like to see Miami come through and go from there. And man, they got a challenging task ahead with probably the most physically imposing, the most highly offensive scoring, and probably the most fiery of all coaches in this Final Four, in Danny Hurley. Um, moving forward, or next up in this Final Four round. So it'll be an
Yeah.
interesting matchup to see.
I definitely, I mean, obviously, congratulations to Miami. But I definitely want to shout out Jim Larinaga. This is a
Yeah.
guy who, kind of burst onto our scene, or at least our peripherals, a few years back with George Mason. And look,
Yes.
as unexpected as the Miami Hurricanes are being in the Final Four, when he took George Mason to the Final Four, that was Cinderella all the way through. We've seen plenty of 16, or well, not plenty, but we've seen plenty of high seeds take down lower seeds in the first round of the tournament, but we don't see them progress. Well, George Mason was kind of that first team, maybe besides Butler, but Butler I think was a little different because they had such star power. But to see George Mason do that, and now to see Jim Larinaga back there. And one of the best things I've learned about Jim Larinaga as a head coach, and something I think more coaches should embrace, is he doesn't call timeouts to stop momentum. He doesn't call timeouts to settle players down. He calls timeouts to make adjustments or to get certain players in the game. It's the only time he's going to call a timeout. So you're down, this 12-0 run for the other team. Jim Larinaga, as if he has the five guys that he thinks is going to get the job done, you got to play out of it. And I think that's something that we really need to see more of. And I think that has been a big reason why we see Miami where they are now, especially considering the adversity they had to go through in that Elite Eight game, where it seemed like they were down by double digits and you blink and they won the game. It was really an incredible coaching performance, not just this weekend, but really for the whole career of Jim Larinaga. I think this has kind of stamped his Hall of Fame resume, at least in my book. Ideally, he can get the job done, and I would love to see him. I mean, he's my second pick of coaches that deserve it at this Final Four, but he definitely does deserve to be picking up that trophy on Monday. But we shall see, as he's got a huge test ahead of him in UConn, which is the perfect segue into our final region. It was the West, obviously. The UConn Huskies at 29-8, they win the West. And folks, it was not even close. UConn dominated throughout the tournament in their 4 games. They've averaged a combined, or excuse me, an average of 22.5 points differential. So they've just dominated. They haven't had to deal with adversity. They haven't had to deal with really a close game. And also something that I saw was pretty interesting heading into, of course, the Final Four. They are the heavy, heavy favorites to win the national title. They are minus 125. SDSU is plus 390. Miami plus 500, and FAU plus 600. Obviously, different betting sites will have different, but you're going to see the UConn Huskies as the heavy, heavy favorite heading into the Final Four. Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on the West region?
Let me start with this. America, hear me out. If you've been listening to the podcast, we're some 50 minutes into it, little over 50 minutes. But my brothers orchestrated this thing so that we would talk about the West last, and I could just sit here and lament and stew and hold my emotions, fight back tears, rend my garments even. Oh, let's wrap up the segment with Jim talking about Gonzaga. Wow, guys. Wow. What can I say? All kidding aside, I will tell you what, my son was in the house at T-Mobile for that game on Saturday. He sent me a text, and his first text was, UConn is huge, and they haven't missed a shot yet during warmups. Next text I got from him said, I'll tell you this: whoever wins this game is going to be the national champion. He didn't say Zags are going to win, UConn's going. He just said of the two teams, whoever wins this one, there's your national champion, and I go with that. I mean, UConn just a dynamo. What a dynamo! And as I text to you guys over the weekend, you get your ass beat, you get your ass beat. So all you can do is go forward, keep your head up. Did you try your best? Maybe you didn't. Maybe the shots weren't falling for you. Fine, fine, fine. But it's not. Nobody stole the game from you. It's nobody else's fault. You got beat. So Gonzaga got beat, and I think that was Coach Few and Drew Timmies and the rest of the guys. That was their approach. Not easy to accept. But the West, another one, Kansas. Kansas doesn't get out of that second round. The number one teams just didn't have it this year. Kind of makes you scratch your head and look at the committee and go, "Yeah, you guys were really good this year, weren't you?" I mean, none of those number one seeds were doing much of anything. UConn handled the West Coast Conference though, because before they beat up on Gonzaga, they beat up on Coach Bennett's kids and got rid of St. Mary's. Uh, UCLA played a great game, and I think that took a lot out of Gonzaga. That game against UCLA, I think they were just tired. Think about how fresh these UConn players must have felt by the time they stepped on the floor. They never, it was all warm up for them, those first three games. And I mean that, but I know they still had to try and put forth effort. But wow. But in general, the West, uh, what a great showing by all the teams. As far as Gonzaga, I will have to make the statement. You know what? They weren't supposed to win the conference. They weren't supposed to win the West Coast Conference. They weren't supposed to challenge for first place. They weren't supposed to get out of the first or second round. And for them to get all the way to the Elite Eight speaks a lot about the character of Coach Few, Drew Timmy, and those guys out there. I'm still proud of the Zags, but I really think my son was right. Watch for UConn.
Yeah, I also want to thank you, Raider Jim, for giving me enough credit to think that I'm smart enough to look that far ahead and think that
Did
I
you
put that together diabolically. I'll put my hand up and say I definitely put the South region first for my own personal want of San Diego State, but I guess when it was all said and done, it did shake out that way. Do apologize. Hopefully the garments are still okay in the Martinez household. But yeah, once again, thank you for giving me the benefit of the brain doubt there. But trust me, I could barely think that just typing these days is tough for me upstairs.
At
So
2 minutes and 30 seconds left in the game, I sent a text to one of my buddies who went to San Diego State, and I said, I think it's mathematically impossible now.
yeah. Yeah, it would take it would take about a what, 2 10-point shots, and we're still gonna be a little dicey towards the end, but it was unfortunate. But for UConn, wow, what a run through that tournament. Very, very impressive. Or through that bracket, I should say, very impressive. And also, UConn going probably, I don't know the exact numbers on it, but they did some traveling. If you're in Connecticut and
True.
you're going to Vegas, that's a hefty flight there. So they weren't handed a whole lot in terms of that from the committee. But Coach, what are your thoughts on the West Regional?
Yeah, UConn. I mean, we've spoke about them all season long, coming out of that Big East. Before Raider Jim popped on and caught us, kind of like, "Hey, let's make him go last." Kind of
Plotting is the
plotting.
word.
Yeah,
Plotting, look at that.
yeah, yeah. We talked about how they didn't even finish top four in their conference, but I think we have all spoke on them talking about, look at the bodies these guys have, look at the length these guys have, and then confirmation Raider Jim's son is just like, these guys are big. Yeah, they're big. They got NBA mature bodies on them, and you know what? Yeah, they did walk into that Gonzaga game. Yeah, Gonzaga did have the fight, and that's just the breaks, I guess. You know,
It
and
is, yeah.
yeah, it's just the breaks. I mean, uh, they're there now, though. So UConn is there, and they got a tough matchup against Miami, a team that isn't going to be intimidated. might not have the size to match up, but at this point, let's not talk about name value for programs. Every school's here for a certain reason. Whether it's they all have the athleticism, they all could put the ball in the hoop, or they all could defend. These are the final four teams that are left, and that's what we got to work with. And UConn, rightfully so, made a very dominating run to the Final Four, and have kind of like quietly snuck in um, after not performing so hot in the Big East regular season and whatnot. So it's until we get there on Saturday, we don't know what to expect. Maybe the ball doesn't drop like it did the last game. Maybe the depth of this gosh darn football stadium isn't going to let the shooters have a good backdrop. That's a huge thing to deal with. Maybe the spotlight of being in the Final Four is going to be too big. They keep saying, "Oh, well, UConn's won the national title already." Not one of those kids have. Not that coaching staff has. So nobody knows where they're all going to come from and knows what to expect until that ball gets tipped and gets put through the hoop. So, you know, I think this is what we get as far as the Final Four goes. No true blue bloods. Um, this is what we get in a Final Four when there's NILs. This is what we get in a Final Four when the transfer portal is the wild, wild west, and it's going to be a sign to come moving forward. Uh, I said it with the coaching carousel. Expect Patino and Cooley to have immediate success, just like these teams. Jim Boeheim crying about Miami buying their team. Look where they're at. Well, then the next thing is, yeah, they just bought their way into a Final Four. Well, that's what they did. And that's what teams got to do. That's what teams are starting to do more and more. So we have our Final Fours matched up, set for Saturday, and I just can't wait. I'm going to get myself an order of hot wings. I'm going to get myself some cola. I'm going to get myself ready to just sit down on my couch and watch an evening of college basketball so that I could share my thoughts with y'all after Monday. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I don't know what rapper said it or whatever, but as they say, don't hate the player, hate the game. The rules are there, and if you take advantage of them and you're not cheating, hey, get mad at the rule maker, not the person who knows how to take advantage of them.
Exactly.
Period. Yeah, everyone has, I don't want to say a fair playing field, but everyone's working through the same rules. And then the people that are doing it the right way, they're just doing it better than the others. It's period. That's all there is to it. It's unfortunate. But at the end of the day, I do think we'll see some tweaking going forward with NILs and transfer portals. It is a bit of a wild, wild west. I'd like to see a little more balance in that, but that's for another podcast. But we have got, of course, to the point of the show where it's time for us to look ahead, of course, to this weekend. Obviously, only 3 college basketball games. Well, 3 that matter. No offense to the NIT and the CBI and whatever crazy tournaments are out there that Detroit Mercy tried to conjure out of thin air to get Antoine Davis. Sorry. That's a whole. I just opened up a whole Pandora's box on that. But
get refocused.
The Final Four, 3 big games left. Going forward, Raider Jim, what do you expect to see this weekend into Monday?
Well, I'm looking at the current odds, and I will tell you what, the Huskies, of course, are the hands-down favorite. They're at minus 125 right now. Aztecs are minus 400, followed by Miami and Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic's at like 650. But even for winning the national championship, Huskies are at 125, San Diego State's at 390, Miami's at 440, and Florida Atlantic is at 650 right now on FanDuel. So they're saying Aztecs look like they're the number 2 pick out there to win to get into the national championship game and maybe win the whole thing. So let's hope that ball carries through with the Aztecs and they have a great weekend. Let's hope that come Monday we do a quick podcast if we're able to talk about that national championship game and root them on.
Yeah,
Also,
oh,
I heard what you said. Uh, and again, ladies, forgive my partners because I want to say congratulations to the number one South Carolina, number two Iowa, number one Virginia Tech, and number three LSU women's teams who also play high caliber NCAA basketball. They are playing their Final Four this Friday afternoon and evening to determine which two are going to play in the Women's National Championship. Ladies, all my respect.
yeah, Caitlin
Wow.
Clark. She is
Wow.
she's an absolute baller. What was it? 41 points, 13 assists, 10 rebounds. I might have the rebounds and assists mixed up, but I know it was 41 points. First player in women's tournament history to have a 30 and 40-point triple double. Absolutely
Amazing.
incredible. She's on that Sue Bird, Brianna Stewart level of in terms of just superstardom coming out of college. And you know what? To be fair, it's really nice to see someone other than UConn. And I think that's another thing for the women's game that I can look. I'll be honest. Look, if you're a UConn fan, you don't like it, but it did get a little tough to it being UConn versus Tennessee or
UConn,
UConn versus
Tennessee.
Stanford
Yeah.
every single year. Now, once again, Gino Auriemma, he's never going to apologize for that. I would never expect it, but I do think that will help the women's college basketball where you have the South Carolinas, the Notre Dames, kind of, I don't want to say new bloods, but pretty much anybody but UConn, because it was about 20 years of absolute dominance from the UConn ladies, for good reason. Don't get me wrong. They did everything right. It wasn't any underhanded tactics, but it is great to see kind of the parity that we see in men's basketball start to move towards women's side as well. But coach, what are your thoughts as we look ahead to the men's Final Four this weekend?
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm just really looking forward to it, open-minded. I'm cheering on my Aztecs. Um, I know you guys weren't going to bring up CGI and NIT, and Raider Jim had to throw us under the bus, not mentioning the ladies. Great job, ladies. Forgive me, please. But I will bring up the NIT. And the only reason why I'm going to bring up the NIT is because there's a kid by the name of Kai Huntsberry that started his collegiate career as a transfer from a four-year university down to my beloved San Diego City College. This
Oh, very
kid
good.
put in 2 seasons at San Diego City College, transferred to a lower level four-year university. I forgot the name of it. Forgive me, Kai. But then found himself as the newcomer of the year in the conference, got a little love, got himself back into the transfer portal, playing for North Texas, who is in the NIT championship game. I saw him play against Oklahoma State. I believe that was a semifinal the other night. And it was a close game throughout. And they're running offensive sets through Kai in the final minutes to close out the game, along with their other guard, who's like a 5'6" dynamo, JUCO national JUCO player of the year himself. But then he's also guarding Oklahoma State's top offensive guy at the end of the game too. So congratulations to Kai. Good luck in the NIT championship game with your North Texas squad. And I'm rooting for you. And once a night, always a night. And guys, I'm looking forward to an awesome weekend of basketball.
Yeah, I think I saw something. Conference USA is 16-1 this
Wow.
postseason. Obviously, North Texas has helped that, and Florida Atlantic as well. And I'm sure there were some other teams that aren't on my radar. But congratulations to the Conference USA to really get those wins in. For me, looking ahead this weekend, obviously, go Aztecs. I'm hoping they take care of business against Florida Atlantic. I expect them to. One of the big things for me for the Aztecs that we've seen is you look at what this team has faced. They faced Charleston that averaged 80 points a game. They held them to 57. You look at Alabama. Furman averaged just below 81 points a game. They held them to 52. Alabama just below 82 points per game. They held them to 64. Creighton, 76 points per game, held them to 56. FAU averages very close to 79 points per game. I think San Diego State's going to have to win this game in the high 50s, low 60s, as they've done all season. I do expect they do get that done. And on the other side of things, with all due respect to Jim Larinaga, the Miami Hurricanes, I think they just run into a buzzsaw that is UConn. But Coach, you brought up a very interesting point that I hadn't really thought about, but it was the reliance on shooting, which is great, being in a football stadium. The depth perception is not, it's not easy to get used to. You can get in there in practice and do things like that, but you don't have 55, 60,000 people in the background that you will on Saturday to go along with the nerves. So, of course, in that situation, anything can happen, but I do expect UConn to get the job done. Heading into the national title game, I love the Aztecs. I really do. But it would be very, very difficult for me to pick the Aztecs over UConn, assuming the Huskies go out and do what they've done all tournament.
Go ahead. All the national guys are too.
Hey, and you know what? I've been
go
pretty
ahead.
much wrong about everything, so maybe I'm throwing that out there as a kind of a reverse
Yeah.
jinx right there. But it has been a crazy tournament, and I would not be surprised to see San Diego State facing a Miami. Depending on what Jim Larinaga's
Right.
boys can do, I wouldn't be surprised they go out. Maybe they blow the doors off UConn, and we're wondering, wait, did we have that all backwards? But I do know these next three games are going to be absolutely fantastic. And of course, you know, here in the city of San Diego, all eyes will be on the Aztecs on Saturday and hopefully on Monday as well. But that is all we have for you. We got final thoughts. So, Coach or Raider Jim, what you got for
I
us?
got one more thing to add. Coach triggered my memory when he talked about the young man from City College playing in the Final Four this coming weekend. We're going to see on UConn, guard off the bench,
Yes.
number 3, Joey Calcaterra, who
Yes.
last year played for the USD Toreros, hit the transfer portal, and probably had his sweetest game against a Gonzaga team that he's ever had in his NCAA career. Joey, congratulations. Good luck. I'm sure everybody in that thriving metropolis of Novato are going to be watching, tuned in, and proud of you.
Yeah, that's a great call right there,
Good
and
shot out
good
there.
for him to get that Gonzaga monkey off his back in a very big way, to do that as well, and really hit the jackpot in the transfer portal. Not
Certainly
only do
did.
you go to UConn, but you get to play under Danny Hurley, who the Hurley coaching lineage, you know, going back to his dad at, I believe it's St. Francis. I read a book about it, but I think it was St. Francis. It's a very, very small private school. He took them essentially to the best team in New Jersey over the last 20 to 30 years until he retired. So the Hurley family, very, very successful in what they've done. Danny Hurley picking up the torch there. But Coach, will give you the first crack at the final thoughts for the Final Four episode.
Like I said, I'm gonna get me an order of chicken wings, some cola, and whatever else that I think is flavorful at the store that I'll go to, and just sit my butt down on the couch all Saturday in preparation for Monday. I think I'm gonna come down with something on Monday.
Yeah.
Won't be bothered, and you know, a lot of good things happening in town starting tomorrow.
Mhm.
Opening day, opening series this weekend for the pods, and yeah, you guys will always have full access to me via text, and I'll get back when I can. But looking forward to a great, fun Final Four.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be the way that everyone expected on paper, but this is our reality right now. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and the way the season is gone, you can't be too surprised that we're in this. I mean, obviously, the teams being there, you can be surprised individually, but to know that, wow, you know, if you would have told us 3 months ago this scenario, maybe without the teams, but you give me the seeds, and you would have been like, you know what? I think that makes sense. I don't know what those teams will be, but those seeds, the way the season's gone, I think
Yeah,
we could see
yeah,
that happening. But
yep.
Raider Jim, your final thoughts for the Final Four preview episode.
Yeah, San Diego State, everybody's with you. The whole city's going to be watching you guys, and kind of hate to see the Padres have their opening weekend on Saturday because I don't think many people are going to be paying attention to that. but I know the Padre organization will do right and make sure they keep things updated on the scoreboard. Go Aztecs.
Amen. For my final thoughts, there's someone out there, and I don't know if they listen. If they do, after I rip you to shreds right here, I plead for you to continue to listen. But this goes out to De'Aaron Fox, who I believe plays for the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah.
He was a former Kentucky Wildcat, obviously a very talented basketball player. Had an interesting quote this past weekend, and interesting is the most diplomatic adjective I can put towards that, essentially saying the college game is unwatchable for him. Too many players miss shots, too many coaches make bad decisions, referees make bad decisions. Well, look, I let's just have a heart to heart, Mr. Fox. I'm going to tell you this right now. I knew who you were because you played at Kentucky. You know what I had to Google? I had to Google what NBA team you're on. I don't watch NBA because for all the reasons you think college basketball is unwatchable, those are the exact opposite reasons I think NBA is unwatchable. Play defense. I'm begging somebody in the NBA. I mean, do they even have a defensive player of the year anymore? Award anymore? I mean, I feel like you flip a coin, you pull a name out of a hat. Hey, you're the defensive player of the year this year. So you stay in your lane, make your millions of dollars, refuse to play defense, pad your stats, and leave college basketball to the people who enjoy the sport of basketball, not the sport of here's a jump shot, here's a travel into a dunk, here's a travel into a layup. We don't need that. I would prefer 55-53 over 155 to 153, 7 out of 7 days, twice on Sunday. So, with that, thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the In the Paint podcast presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It's time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating everybody. As always, huge shout out to Gray Space. Make sure you go give them a follow as well. They do fantastic work making this look as professional as we do. So thank you all again so much. Have a wonderful time. And of course, go Aztecs. Take care.